Thanks so much for watching Philosophy All Along. Today, I am so grateful to have our special guest, Colton Ogburn of ScreenCrush. If you haven't seen ScreenCrush, if you have not gone to their YouTube, please do so right now, because if you like what I do here, you're going to love what they do. And Colton himself is just a brilliant specialist. He really gets into deep dives, not just in things like Easter eggs, but also his own fan theories, and also like some meta commentary on things like superheroes and a lot of other media. So it's just such a pleasure to have you here, Colton. I'm really, really glad to have you here and to kind of help me explore some of my own intuition. So here's what it really comes down to. When I sat down and watched Superman 2025, I could not help but think, oh, wow, there is commentary here on Israel and Gaza. Like, this is just there. It's evident, right? We have, this one country that's supported by the United States that is going and basically invading this other smaller group that seems to have often engaged in some sort of unethical activity or maybe has some sort of terrorist connection. And so I was like, wow, this seems to be really a statement here. So I guess my first question to you is, am I out of my mind when I see that? Are these connections really there? Are there any that we're missing? What do you think?
No, you're not out of your mind at all. Yeah, I saw it as well. And before we got started, we were kind of running down what we were going to talk about. You mentioned like this anti-Israel sentiment that some people are having. It's not an anti-Israel sentiment. It's a tyrannical government going into another country that they have no business being in and overthrowing it and killing innocent people problem. If you have a problem with that, I have a problem with that. I think most people do. If you happen to see, oh, that's kind of like what's happening with Israel and Gaza, well, I mean, I think that answers your question. I don't think it's making any type of statement necessarily. I know James Gunn is, yeah, he's a political guy. We know his political leanings. I'm confident that whether or not he had the idea before this conflict, resurfaced, and like it's been like 3 years now since what tragically happened on October 7th. I'm not excusing that whatsoever. I think the Gunn, you can say with 100% certainty, yes, he was aware of how this would be perceived. And of course, there's also the whole Russia-Ukraine angle, but it's kind of like the opposite.
Right.
With Israel and Gaza, Israel is the U.S. ally, and they are the invader, and we are backing the invader. And then with Russia-Ukraine, the country being invaded is the ally. And so there's interesting juxtapositions there. But no, to answer your question in a roundabout way, no, you're not crazy whatsoever. That's totally, it's something that's been going on forever. It's nothing new. Countries invading other countries, I mean, that's just a motif in storytelling at this point. Right. So it's not James Gunn or Warner Brothers or DC's fault that our own world has become so much like a comic book. I believe we talked about this in our previous video that we did together with Kingpin being like Trump. That's something that was done in the comics before Trump became president, and it's art imitates life, and sometimes life begins to imitate art, I guess you could say.
Right. It would be funny if like all these dictators around the world are like reading comic books. So like, oh, that's what we actually need to do, right? Like, oh, that's a good idea. We hadn't thought about that. Well, okay, so something I think that we probably should address. Like, there is definitely kind of an elephant in the room, which is always the worry that if you discuss this issue, particularly Israel and Gaza, that there is this issue that you are somehow a proponent of terrorism or anti-Israel, or I think it's fair to say far worse, anti-Semitic, right? And for me, this is always such a scary conversation to have, that the realization that a criticism of, say, a specific governmental leader, not even an entire nation, but specifically someone like, say, Benjamin Netanyahu, could be read by others as what you're actually doing is attacking the Jewish people. Which is really a tough problem, because the realization is part of the reason why I would never ever want to attack the Jewish people is for the same exact reason that I'm deeply concerned about the people in Gaza. That you're talking about a group of people that have been victimized and terrorized, have done nothing to deserve what's happened to them, that there's this massive history of abuse and genocide and forced migration that has happened in this case now increasingly to both. And so the realization that we are often told by politicians or pundits or talking heads to some degree like ourselves that we can't talk about the thing, it's really, really difficult, because what we're wanting to do, I think, is often speak out of compassion, right? Out of concern for people who are being harmed by things. I love the fact, though, that you mention Russia and Ukraine. And I think that that's really important, because you made a great point. It's literally like the opposite way around, right? Where, okay, now we're defending the people who are on the defense. And so I did think that that was also a key thing that's being discussed here through the film, by virtue of the fact that there's a moment in which there's this gesture towards, we are going and invading Jarhanpur to protect ourselves, which sounds to me a lot like Russia, that Russia had said, we are going and invading Ukraine for that reason. And so that seems to me a very smart point that you're making, that what this is really just a larger issue of using the same tropes that are actually seen in the world. Do you have, just out of curiosity, because you're always reading these things and you're much more in the know than I am, do you have any like inside information that suggests, like, did James Gunn actually intend to make these gestures, or was it really just accidental and we're imposing on it now? Like the screenplay was written long before and we're just imposing ourselves on it. What do you know?
Nothing. I know nothing. I mean, look, I mean, I think I kind of, dipped into that a second ago, in the sense that Gunn, there's no way that he made this movie without realizing what he was doing. I don't know that that was his intention. If it was, that's fine by me. I'm all for, putting out your political whatever in your art. I think that's fine. I mean, you should be prepared to be critiqued by it. And, you have this free speech to say what you want in your art. Others have this free speech to criticize it. I don't have any inside information where Gunn has said, yes, I specifically based this off what's happening here or here. But I would assume, even if he had this general idea, based on many wars, I mean, even we have invaded countries that we had no business being in, perhaps because we felt, oh, well, really, it was because, we wanted to go in there and take their oil. But, they could, argue and say, oh, well, it's Islamic extremism and they have Sharia law and they're homophobic and they're sexist. All fair critiques. There are sections of Islam that get so intertwined in their government that become extremely right-wing governments. I've often made the argument that I think the Republican Party would be shocked how much they have in common with Sharia law. But yeah, it's something. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought on that.
So
what was the original?
So we're really just looking at whether or not James Gunn did this kind of
on purpose. Right. Sorry, I went off on a tangent there.
That's a good tangent. We're going to come back to it for sure.
Could I real quick tie back to the anti-Semitism thing? I want to get into that a little bit.
Sure.
And to your point about the anti-Semitism, I mean, that's a very real thing. And talking about the juxtaposition, the flipping of roles with the Gaza, Israel, the Russia, Ukraine, I think what we have to keep in mind, and this might get me in some trouble, but I'll say it. My critique is, of course, I feel silly that I even have to say this. I have no critique of the Jewish people. I have no critique of the Israeli people. Of course not. My critique is of Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think it is just disgusting that he and his militia, Israel is supposed to be this safe haven following the Holocaust. And it is gross to see that in a lot of ways, he has become the very thing he swore to destroy in a lot of ways, to quote Star Wars for some reason, because I can't help myself. But
Same.
It's very disappointing to see that happening. And a little bit to what I was saying earlier when I kind of lost my train of thought, it's that it is irrelevant whether you agree with, say, the politics or the religious beliefs that might dominate an area like Gaza and what they happen to believe. And maybe if you'd like to go on like what do Christians do? The mission trips and stuff, they go in and they try to, influence through argument. Hey, think of it this way. That's fine. I'm not advocating for, the evangelical Christian thing, but I'm just saying, like, do your mission statement. The answer to regime change is you've got to let them change it themselves. You have to win that in an argument. The answer is not bombing the hell out of them and installing your own leader. I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah,
and I think that that's
not work.
And I think that's kind of something Superman learns, is that at the beginning of the film, he went in there and he used his force to do what he wanted to do. But I think come the end of the film, he realizes that what he represents, the hope he represents, is how he can change the hearts and minds of people to prevent these wars from happening in the first place. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really nice connection. I think that a lot of people part of the reason why we're having this conversation is people have been critical of the film and critical of James Gunn and saying that it's just this kind of political gesture. And so there's this argument happening online. And one issue that comes up, I think you've already made, which is just really important, is if you look at how often art has been a political statement, this would not be new. And I think that's important, and that's fair, right? It is pretty much as long as people could be making graffiti, they have been making statements about politics and power and their beliefs worldwide throughout the entire history of humanity. And you see this issue of like recognizing, you have people like Banksy, you have people who are making statements with their art, and you don't have to agree with those statements. And it is odd that we seem to be in a position such that we are increasingly, as a people, becoming less patient with people using art to kind of make their statement, and then us going, yeah, I agree or I disagree. I watched the film, I didn't like it, but there's a greater kind of gesture towards, well, they need to be silenced, they need to stay in their lane, which tends to walk hand in hand with dictatorial regimes, right? That from the before the ancient Greeks, you would see this realization of, oh, we only allow certain kinds of songs or certain kinds of music or certain kinds of expression because it becomes a danger to us in power. To your point about Superman, I think what's really smart about what you're saying here, Colton, is the very fact that in our criticism of this, like, oh, why is he making this statement, James Gunn, the realization that he's having a whole conversation in the film, that Superman is literally having to address the criticism himself. Like, should I be going in and getting involved when I see that there's this, what I perceive to be this great injustice being done? And so that it isn't just a final statement, that the film doesn't just say, okay, here's what I believe, go in and, act in this way, that it's really very self-reflective. Like, if I just go in and act this way, and if I don't affect people's hearts and minds, that, it's exactly the problem that I'm saying I want to avoid. So that's really smart.
There's also the problem that, okay, so the moving picture medium, filmmaking, has been around, what, a century, a little longer than a century or so. And the stories that we've told through filmmaking were typically, Star Wars is a great example. It's recreating these stories from history that we weren't alive for. And it's generally all things that we, for the most part, to quote Maxwell Lord in the movie, if there's one thing liberals and conservatives can agree on, it's that Lex Luthor's a douchebag. Generally, we used to could all agree on, oh, this part of history was good, this part of history was bad. Slavery was bad. We could all agree on that. Nowadays, things are, and I don't know, maybe every generation feels this way, but like, there was a time where we could agree that Nazism was bad and that what Hitler did was bad and that the Holocaust was bad. But now even that seems to be an argument. And especially as we're seeing our more recent history get caught up, like say the 90s and on in our politics, I think in the past few years, like in the past 10 years, we've really seen like the Iraq War and the invasion of Afghanistan. That has started to be portrayed in our films. And you didn't see too much pushback on that because nowadays liberals and conservatives all generally agree that what we did in Iraq was no bueno. But now we are seeing this commentary on Trumpism And I think having that Biden term in between has kind of extended this era, and it's making it to where we are adapting things that have been happening for more than 10 years now, and we're seeing that come into film, but it's still like it's not based on history. It's still a very present thing, and it's making people uncomfortable, and it's making people kind of like, I don't know if you've seen that show Euphoria, but there's an episode in season 2 where they're watching a play, and the play is about the mean girl, and she goes, wait a minute, is this about us? And that's what I imagine conservatives feel like watching like
Right.
The Boys, for example. Can you believe it took some of them until season 3 to realize that the show was making fun of them? I am happy.
It did take a little while.
Yeah, I am happy to report my like left of center grandmother I took to see Superman. She loved it. I also took my Trump supporting grandmother, who's she's a big Trump gal. And I asked her, I said, did you think the movie was woke? I said, I'm hearing a lot of, people on your side of the aisle saying, oh, it's woke and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, no, I didn't get that at all. And she loved the movie. So it really is just a lot of rhetoric online, because even her, as she's a conservative, right wing, whatever, that's her shtick, but she loved the Superman movie. So I think a lot of it is, like saying this movie is so political and all of this stuff.
Right.
I think a lot of it's being a little blown out of proportion.
Yeah. So firstly, I just have to say how charming it is that you bring your Mimas to see the movies. I think that's a really wonderful. I just a brief thing, just kind of like a brief philosophical aside. It is interesting to note that because we had Biden in between, that for people who have been growing up, say they were 10 years old when Donald Trump was first elected, it will have been 12 years of Donald Trump being the main focus of political discourse of their lives. That's a long time. You know what I'm saying? Like from 10 to 22, to almost to the point where it does become like people who have spent their entire lives, and I don't mean this in any particular way in this case, but like under one like dictator, where they just kind of can't imagine who else would be around. Like, because even during Biden, Donald Trump was still the major push and point of conversation. He had so much say in how everything was happening. So to me, I think it's not something we've ever really seen before in the United States, was have someone be that much in our living rooms for that long as the person that we are looking to save our economy and save our people and make us a stronger nation, so on and so forth. But to some of your other thoughts there, it is, I think, at the end of the day, interesting that you can take some people to see it and they're like, honestly, I don't even really see why someone would consider it woke. I always take umbrage to the use of woke in this pejorative sense.
They can't even
literally
define it.
Yeah, well, it comes all the way back. So it was something used like back in the 1970s
Right.
by the black population, and that we have now turned it in a negative way. And so it's just this very long history of like anytime the black community comes up with a thing, we steal it, we co-opt it, and then people on the right start using it in this kind of abusive way. I do think that there is something to say for the fact that the people on the most extreme right have an issue that they were not entirely wrong about, but were also very wrong about it. And it's simply this, that I think addresses some of what you're saying. Like, we could all agree Nazism was wrong and slavery was wrong and so on and so forth. Agreed that there was a long time in my youth where it was like, okay, obviously we don't want to destroy the planet. Obviously, slavery was wrong. Like, those things were obvious. The problem was that liberals forget that they are just as human as everybody else, that they are no better in their flaws and in their thinking and the possibility that their logic can be askewed and their preferences and their feelings than conservatives. In fact, I know a lot of people who are liberals, like myself, who can't really give a reason for why they believe what they believe. They just believe it really strongly. And to me, what that has resulted in was not just us kind of consciously as a society recognizing things like Nazism was wrong, but we couldn't give reasons. And then anytime someone would pop up, even too closely hewing to that belief set, we would crush them. We would cancel them. We would make sure that they never spoke again. And that created, I think, a feeling on the fringe of being silenced. It led to more conspiracy theories, because as soon as you're quieting people, it's going to lead to conspiracy theories, but also just to this feeling of these liberals, which is supposed to be about liberty, hence liberals, that are inconsistent when they say that everyone should be able to talk and be free and share their thoughts and ideas. And so when conservatives are critical of that hypocrisy, I don't think that they're entirely wrong. And then the pushback now has been, you put out a movie that has some fairly obvious common tropes and they're trying to silence it, saying that it's a political statement.
Well, and you know, one thing I still love about the movies is the movies are the one thing, like theatrical movies, that we as a people all watch, like at right and left. Back in the day, everybody watched what was it? Was it Cronkite? Was that
Yes,
the line? It's yeah. You know, everybody watched the same nightly news, so we were all getting the same, you know, information that we could generally trust, and I think that led to us on most controversial issues being on the same page. Now, one person might hear a completely alternate bent to an issue compared to somebody else with, you know, with social media and all that. And the movies are still the one place where, you know, I saw the same Superman movie that you saw, that he saw, that she saw, that they saw. And that general message, I think, can still, I guess what I'm trying to say is film is like the only way that we can save humanity. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
I love that so much. Because like my head went, oh my God, is film the only place that people are getting their news? Right? Like, oh crap. So, okay, so just a couple of brief things as we start to wrap it up, and thank you to our patient viewers, because this is just so much fun for me. We tend to go on about it. I really I'm curious to know, do you think that whether or not Gunn did this on purpose with Superman, should people be trying to do, and I think you kind of answered this to some degree, but should we be making political statements through not just our art, but through like the pop culture media? We're just going for a tentpole film. I just want to have a nice time. I don't want to have to think so deeply. Is that the space that they should be challenging us?
Well, like I said a second ago, kind of to address the, when I said that I asked my more conservative grandmother, is it woke? I want to say, yeah, I proudly embrace the woke label. You know, I was asking it more so in the, you know, they view it as such a negative thing. So with having said that, you know, I make things, I make, you know, content, and I do not shy away from putting my own, you know, political whatever in it. I'm conflicted because I think I'm a super fair person. And so if I were to go into a movie that was shoving a bunch of stuff down my throat that I thought was just abhorrent, part of me is like, this is really annoying. I wanted to come see this movie, but I feel like it's just pushing a bunch of right-wing propaganda on me. So I can see how, you know, somebody who maybe has a different political philosophy than I do, going into a movie where they do have maybe more of a political, a liberal political bent to the film. I could see how that would be frustrating. In terms of like a profit motive, like what the studios want to do, yeah, I do think that there are certain films that, you know, should dive into it more than others. I think a Superman movie should be something that appeals to a broad audience. But I think the way to achieve, if you're wanting to put in a message, the way to achieve that is with subtlety. Like, I'm all for woman power in movies. I hate the girls get it done type scene in Avengers Endgame, where just all the girls happen to be in that one spot. They all group together, and Spider-Man's like, I don't know how you're going to get through that after Captain Marvel just flew through that ship. That is such a man's idea of a girl power scene. So stuff like that, I feel, is like a studio note where they're trying to make a point, and it's like doing a disservice. It's doing the opposite. So the really on the nose, like political things that seem like they're just doing it for points, that kind of gets on my nerves, especially when I agree with the point and I'm like, you're making us look stupid. That's when I get kind of irritated by it. But I think that Gunn handled it brilliantly, because there's so much in that film, especially with like even the, you know, Lex calling him an it and an alien, and oh, he's not from here. I don't even have to say. It's obvious what he's saying there. But that's something that the Superman comics have been doing for 50 years, or more than 50 years. So it's nothing new with the movie. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, I'm fine with it. I understand why it might upset some people. And I would encourage any filmmakers who do have something that you genuinely, a message that you want to share with your audience, do it in a way that is like actually inspirational and perhaps more vague, instead of just trying to, shoehorn something in. Having said that, I don't want to give the right wingers any ideas.
Well, that's very smart. It does speak to the problem of like when it is when these things are done in an overt way that are almost like, okay, almost like for the purpose of your Instagram pic kind of a thing. Like, oh, look at that one scene.
Yeah.
It's such a brief moment that, have you really done any good? Have you really made a statement about the experience of women or what it's like to be a female superhero? Or have you just kind of provided us with, a photographable moment? And I do think that like with the advent of the Trump administration's second term, you see how many times things like that are done, like, say like with Target, all of a sudden being willing to pull back on things like Pride. Like you realize, oh, it was always really just about money in the first place. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised about that. But it is, I think, to your point, that people do have a sense of it. Like people aren't dumb. They're aware of like, oh, you're really just doing this to not make a deeper ethical point, but to score a political point in the hopes that it's going to make you money or garner you attention. And I think that's valuable. It does remind me of the ways in which, in a lot of ways, Star Trek, the original Star Trek, was very challenging to people, but in ways that it was able to do it in a roundabout way because it was sci-fi and they were in space and things like that. And so having that first interracial kiss that was televised
Star
was
Trek,
a political statement directly.
In the best way possible. Star Trek, Star Wars, and I say this positively, they are extremely woke in the best way possible.
Yes.
And like I hear people try to say, they say that modern Disney Star Wars is woke. Oh, they're doing this, doing that. And then they try to make the argument of, well, Leia was a strong woman character and that wasn't woke. I'm like, what is you're not,
or was
what
it?
is the difference? Yeah, exactly. They're doing the exact same thing. You just don't have a problem with it because that was, there when you were a kid. And now this new thing, you have a problem with that. And of course you can't pinpoint what your problem is. So you just blame women. But
I think they do. I think they do have a problem with that. I think that social systems get more savvy, and I think society in general gets more savvy, and they've come to realize the real power behind these narratives, and they're actively trying to change them. They've seen the way in which they've learned from Disney trying to like, oh, okay, we want to speak to more women, sometimes in just ways that are just trying to make more money, but in all the ways that they made alterations or changes or started like, oh, okay, well, we'll have a black princess and stuff like that. And they're realizing, oh, wait a minute, this really is effective. And it is effective insofar as that there's little girls who are growing up thinking that they can wield a blaster. And we don't want that. So we need to make some changes. And that's why we need our own TV networks and we're putting out our own movies and so on and so forth. Okay, final thoughts. Do you think that Superman 2025 has a moral message that we should be getting out? I'm not going to say a political message because I'm tired of those two things twaining. I mean a moral, something that we need to learn about ourselves from it.
Treat people with kindness.
I love it. Yes. That sounds like Superman to me. Yeah. I think that's a perfect place to leave it. Treat people with kindness. And if I could add a asterisk, and save the squirrels. Save the squirrels because if you can.
But squirrels. Okay. Get the out of the road. Like,
so the real question will be does that make it into the final cut of this video? Thank you so much for being on the show, Colton. You are so busy doing fabulous work over at ScreenCrush. please do check out his channel. If you've stayed to the end of this video, you will love his work on his channel, and you will love the work that they do on ScreenCrush. Thank you so much for watching. Please also, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to this video as well. Please put down what we missed in the comments. We love to comment and reply to you. And with that, have a great day.